And honestly, I think I've just settled. You know, that was it. That was the sentence. 7 words, tossed like crumbs onto the table between spoonfuls of risotto. The candle flickered, her mother blinked twice, and her sister let out a tiny, delighted gasp, like she'd been waiting for the drama to finally bubble to the surface. Nobody looked at me. Nobody had to. I heard it all crystal clear. I was sitting right across from her, after all, still holding my fork midair, still trying to remember if I'd already said thank you to the waiter. I thought maybe I'd misheard. I even squinted at her, like somehow her face would betray it was a joke. It wasn't. She didn't look at me when she said it. She aimed her words just left of me, like a confession meant for the room but not the man she was still technically married to. Her fingers were swirling wine in lazy little circles. Her tone was light, like she was talking about the weather, and I sat there like a tourist at my own funeral. Nobody moved. Even the jazz music in the restaurant seemed to pause. Her dad shifted uncomfortably and cleared his throat like he wanted to change the subject, but her mother leaned in closer, eyebrows raised in thrilled horror. Settled? Her mom asked, like the word tasted expensive. She nodded. I mean, I love him, but it's not like he's... And then she did the worst thing possible. She stopped herself. She made a sound, one of those soft, smug little exhale laughs women do when they believe they've said just enough. I wish she'd finished the sentence. I wish she'd said the words out loud so I didn't have to fill in the blank myself. But I did. Of course I did. I'm not bold. I'm not exciting. I don't sail boats or write novels or get stopped at parties by strangers asking where I got my cologne. I'm the guy who remembers to buy batteries before the smoke detector chirps. I'm the one who quietly fixes the garbage disposal and never complains when the leftovers go to her friend's dog instead of the fridge. But settled? She wasn't drunk. She wasn't angry. She was just honest. And somehow that was worse. I didn't stand up right away. That would have been dramatic, and I'm not good at dramatic. I kept eating for another 5 minutes, chewing through pasta that turned to cardboard in my mouth. I kept nodding as her sister talked about Pilates. I even laughed, when her brother made that joke about crypto. But something was leaving me. Quietly, like breath on a cold mirror. When I finally did stand up, no one stopped me. She didn't even ask where I was going. She didn't look up. She just reached for her wine again and said, "He's always walking off like that," as if I were a child having a mood. I walked all the way to the parking lot, past the heater lamps and the sign that said, "Reservations recommended," past the valet who handed me my keys without a word. I sat in the car with the engine off for 30 minutes, just staring at my own hands on the steering wheel, wondering what part of me had made her so tired she forgot I was even real. Settled. It echoed in my chest like a dropped coin in an empty hallway. I didn't go home. I didn't text. And I didn't cry. Not then. But something had shattered. Quietly. So quietly, even I hadn't heard it until it was too late. The motel I found that night had a glowing red vacancy sign and a vending machine with half the lights burned out. I took room 11 because the clerk said it had a working heater, not that I planned to sleep. I remember laying on that stiff mattress, fully clothed, shoes still on, eyes wide open while the television played muted reruns of some sitcom where people laughed too much. It was surreal, like my own life had hit pause, but the world decided to keep moving without me. I kept replaying the word in my head. Settled. Over and over. She didn't scream it. She didn't throw it at me in a fight. She whispered it with a smirk in front of her entire family, like I was a participation trophy she dusted off and displayed out of obligation. And the part that really haunts me? No one flinched. Not even her dad. That's when it hit me. Maybe they'd all known. Maybe everyone around her knew she saw me as some stand-in husband. The safe pick. The placeholder. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the bed watching the steam rise from a cup of weak motel coffee. I thought about calling her. Not to fight, not to beg, just to ask why. But I didn't. I knew the answer. Or at least I thought I did. It wasn't until I opened her laptop that things really started to unravel. I didn't mean to snoop. It had been in the trunk, tossed between a gym bag and a box of old chargers. She asked me to take it in for repairs last week, said it kept overheating. I figured, since I wasn't going home anytime soon, maybe I'd run a few diagnostics myself. I work in IT. It's what I do. It's the one thing I've always been good at, even when I felt invisible in every other part of my life. The first thing that struck me was how empty your desktop was. No clutter, no random screenshots, not even a trash bin with files. Just a clean wallpaper of a lake at sunset. It felt sterilized. Like someone had wiped it for guests. But then I noticed a folder buried deep in the system files. It was locked, but not in a way that said she didn't want it seen, more like someone who thought no one would ever bother looking. I decrypted it in under 3 minutes. Inside were dozens of files, PDFs, photos, copied conversations, and my hands went cold. The first thing I opened was a scanned letter from a real estate agent. A condo listing, not in our city, not even in our state. I recognized her signature at the bottom of a rental agreement. She'd signed it last month. I blinked. No mention of me. No cosigner. Just her. Alone. The next was a screenshot of a Venmo transfer. To someone named Jace. She'd added a note. For the flights, smiley face. Jace? I didn't know a Jace. I opened more. A travel itinerary. 2 tickets. Aruba. Departure date, 2 weeks from now. Then the messages. Not emails. Not texts. Direct messages on some obscure app I'd never even heard of, something encrypted. Their chat history stretched back 6 months. 6 months. It was like watching a slow collapse in real time. She joked about me. Compared me to this guy. Said I was comfortable, predictable, and her emotional support technician. The worst one? He's the kind of guy who double-checks door locks and thinks that's love. I stared at that line for a long time. I double-checked the doors because I care. Because I thought keeping her safe was love. Because I thought noticing the little things made me worth something. But apparently she wanted fire. Chaos. Someone who didn't fold his laundry or label the spice rack. I didn't know whether to throw the laptop or scream or just curl up and disappear. Instead, I saved everything. Every file. Every message. Every receipt. Not out of revenge. Not yet. But because for the first time in our marriage, I needed proof that I wasn't just imagining things. That the dull ache in my chest for the past year wasn't paranoia. It was reality, slowly suffocating me while I smiled through it. She hadn't just settled. She'd planned her exit. Booked it. Funded it. And done it all while lying beside me at night, borrowing my car, asking me to fix the Wi-Fi. And worst of all, she probably would have gone through with it. Slipped away quietly, like a leaf riding a breeze, while I came home to an empty house and a note on the kitchen counter. But not anymore. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. Right now, I was just hollow. And very, very awake. I didn't go back right away. I couldn't. The thought of seeing her face, the face I'd memorized every line of, the one I used to feel lucky waking up next to, made my chest tighten like I was being crushed from the inside out. Instead, I drove aimlessly for hours. I crossed 3 state lines. I ate a stale gas station sandwich on the hood of my car somewhere outside Fayetteville. I even considered just disappearing, driving until the road gave out, starting over. New name, new town, new story. But the truth is, I'm not that guy. I'm not spontaneous. I'm not bold. I'm just Curtis, the guy who thought locking the doors at night meant everything was okay. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't pretend her words at dinner were a heat of the moment slip. Not after what I saw on that laptop. That wasn't a moment. That was a blueprint. A carefully laid plan to replace me while I was still folding her laundry and warming up the car when it snowed. And the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how normal she made it look. Like loving someone quietly wasn't enough anymore. Like the only crimes that count are loud ones. 3 days passed before I stepped foot back inside our house. I waited until I knew she'd be gone. She had weekly yoga on Wednesday nights, a class she never missed. Or at least, that's what I thought it was. Now I wasn't so sure. I parked 2 streets over and walked like a burglar in my own neighborhood. The key still worked. Of course it did. The house looked the same. That was the most disturbing part. Everything was exactly where it always was. My coffee mug was still drying beside the sink. My slippers were tucked beneath the armchair. And her phone charger, the one she always lost, was hanging off the nightstand just like before. You'd never guess this place was weeks away from being abandoned. I moved fast, not because I was scared, but because I felt like a ghost. I wasn't supposed to be here anymore. I was haunting my own life. I grabbed some clothes, my tools, my birth certificate, the fireproof box with our insurance documents, and then I made one small detour. I walked into her office. The room she never let me organize, with the locked drawers and the heavy floral curtains. I stood in the doorway for a second, hands shaking a little, then crossed to the desk and started opening things. I wasn't looking for more evidence. I already had that. I was looking for intention, for a sign that maybe she regretted something, that some part of her hesitated. But all I found were sticky notes with affirmations like, "You deserve more," and don't settle for soft love. She was coaching herself through it, reinforcing her delusion with Pinterest mantras. I found a list titled Exit Steps written in her sharp handwriting. It had checkboxes next to things like book Jace's ticket, transfer savings, and tell Curtis after flight. Not talk, not discuss, not even explain. Tell. Like it was a formality. I sat down in her chair and stared at the list. Something in me broke then. Not like a clean snap, more like the slow split of wood under pressure. Quiet. Final. I put everything back the way I found it. Closed every drawer. Straightened every paper. Because if she wanted to play normal, I could play that game too. In fact, I could play it better. That night, I went back to the motel, took a hot shower for the first time in days, and started drafting a letter. Not to her. Not yet. To a lawyer. A quiet one. Someone I'd found online who specialized in pre-divorce asset protection. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to outpatient her coldness. I was going to build a new reality behind her back, just like she did to me. But I still didn't tell her I knew. Instead, I waited. I let her text me, pretending to be hurt that I had stormed off during dinner. She didn't ask where I was. She didn't apologize for what she said. She just sent one message. Can we talk when you're done sulking? Sulking. I laughed when I read that. A loud, bitter laugh that startled the old couple in the room next to mine. The next morning, I replied, yeah, let's talk this weekend. I'll come by. She wrote back a minute later. Just a thumbs up emoji. That's when I knew she didn't see me as a threat. That would be her biggest mistake. Saturday came, and I showed up at the house with a bag of groceries. I wanted to see how good she'd gotten at pretending, and she didn't disappoint. When she opened the door, her face flickered for just a second. Not surprise, not guilt, something stranger. Like I was early for a meeting she hadn't quite prepared for. But within moments, she smiled. That polite, practiced smile. The same one she used for her boss or her dentist. The kind of smile that said, let's keep this tidy. Hey, she said, stepping aside like we were still teammates in something. I walked in. The air smelled like lavender and fabric softener. A scented illusion of peace. Nothing was out of place. My shoes were still by the door. My keys still in the bowl. She hadn't packed a single box. Maybe because she thought I'd never notice what she'd been planning. Or maybe because she convinced herself I'd forgive her, the way I always had before. I handed her the grocery bag without saying a word. She blinked, caught off guard, and peeked inside. Coffee beans, she said slowly. Your favorite. I nodded. Figured we could talk over a cup. She gave a short, awkward laugh, and something about the way she rubbed her thumb against the handle of the bag told me she was trying to gauge the temperature of the room, wondering if she needed to play gentle or sharp. But I kept my tone neutral. Calm. Controlled. I had no intention of giving her a read on what was happening behind my eyes. In the kitchen, she moved around like she hadn't spent the last 6 months plotting an escape. She measured grounds, filled the kettle, and leaned against the counter like we were about to discuss weekend plans. I was surprised you left like that, she said casually, keeping her back to me. At dinner, I mean. You kind of made it a thing. I said nothing. She glanced at me and kept going. You know how my mom is. She asks questions that sound innocent but aren't. And I was joking, obviously. I didn't mean it that way. Still, I said nothing. She folded her arms, her confidence wavering. You do know that, right? I took a slow breath. You've been talking to someone named Jace. Her jaw didn't drop. Her knees didn't buckle. Instead, she blinked 3 times and set the mug she'd been holding on the counter with careful precision. Then came the classic deflection. Why would you go through my things? That's what she led with. Not denial. Not shock. Just immediate blame shifting. It was almost impressive in a twisted way. I didn't go through anything, I replied. Your laptop was in my trunk. You asked me to fix it. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her face didn't crumble like in the movies. She didn't cry or scream or beg. She just paused, like someone recalculating a route after missing a turn. So what? She finally said, her voice lower now. You read some messages, saw a few transfers, and jumped to conclusions? I could feel my pulse in my throat, but I held steady. I read enough to know you weren't going to tell me until you were already gone. She shook her head, almost pityingly. Curtis, we haven't been happy in years. You know that. You're a sweet guy. You mean well. But I need more than routines and tech talk and microwave dinners. I need something that feels alive. Something that challenges me. I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just escaped. A bitter, broken laugh that scraped out of my chest before I could stop it. You mean someone who calls you babe in disappearing messages and lets you foot the bill while he plans a beachfront escape? That one landed. Her cheeks flushed, whether from anger or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. But she leaned forward now, more venom in her eyes. You're acting like some victim in a drama you helped write. You checked out a long time ago, Curtis. You were always more interested in server updates than me. There it was. Her version of the truth. I'd heard fragments of it in her saved chats, but now I got the whole performance. I was boring. I was safe. I was forgettable. And Jace, some tan man-child with nothing in his name, had lit something in her she hadn't felt since college. I stood there and let her talk. Let her dump years of resentment she never once said out loud when we were still salvageable. I nodded at all the right times. I even offered a sad little smile, like maybe I was finally understanding what she needed. And then I dropped the envelope on the counter. What's this? She asked. A timeline. Financial records. Screenshots. Messages. Printouts of the documents you signed to rent the condo. Copies of the transfers you made. Copies of the receipts you sent to him. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. Why are you giving me this? Because you're going to sign a clean separation. No contest. No claim to the house. No claim to my retirement. No backdoor payout. You're going to walk away with what you brought in. She tried to speak, but I cut her off. And if you don't, I send this folder to your employer. And to your parents. And maybe even to Jace's girlfriend. Because I know he's not single either. You didn't just betray me. You partnered with someone else's liar. The silence that followed was thunderous. No screaming. No slamming drawers. Just the sharp inhale of someone who realized the rules had flipped. You came here to blackmail me? No, I said calmly. I came here to give you an option. You want freedom? Take it. Just don't expect it gift-wrapped. I walked out before she could respond. I didn't need her reaction. I already had what I came for: control. I spent the next 2 days back in the motel, pacing in circles and staring at the ceiling like it held answers I'd missed the first time. The envelope was out of my hands now, and legally speaking, I'd done everything by the book. But I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved. If anything, I felt like I was hovering above my own life, watching a man unravel with every hour that passed. Not because I'd lost her. I think deep down I'd lost her long before Jace came into the picture, but because I'd realized just how many people knew, and not one of them ever said a word. It started when her sister, Melanie, messaged me. A single line. She told you, didn't she? At first, I thought she meant the affair. But the longer I stared at the message, the more it felt like something else. Something layered. I called her. She answered after 3 rings. I didn't think she'd go through with it, Melanie said. Her voice was quiet, almost like she was afraid of being overheard, though I could tell she was alone. She's been talking about leaving for nearly a year. A year, I repeated. You mean the entire time I thought we were working through things? Melanie didn't respond immediately. Then, as if she'd been sitting on it for too long, she let it spill. I tried to talk her out of it. I told her to come clean before she did something irreversible, but she just smiled. She kept saying you wouldn't understand. That you wouldn't get it, because you were too comfortable. Too passive. That word again, comfortable. Apparently, that was the nail in my coffin. And Jace? I asked. You know him too? I met him once, she admitted. She brought him to a gallery opening when she said you were out of town for work. Introduced him as a friend. I didn't buy it. I had no words. Just silence. The kind that made your eardrums ring. She's been rewriting your marriage for months, Melanie added. To herself. To us. You became this placeholder in her head. Someone she convinced herself she had outgrown. And once she had the story straight, she stopped seeing you at all. That broke something in me. Not the cheating. Not the betrayal. But the idea that she'd spent so much time reconstructing reality in a way that made me the problem. That she turned me into a caricature so she could justify the double life. I wasn't a person to her anymore. I was a narrative device. I thanked Melanie and hung up. Later that evening, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, a man's voice came through, low and hesitant. Is this Curtis? Yes. There was a pause. This is Aaron. I'm Jace's brother. I nearly dropped the phone. How did you get this number? I asked sharply. He left a printout at my place, Aaron said, of his travel itinerary, with your number scribbled on the back. I don't think he meant to, but I figured if I was ever going to say something, it had to be now. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my whole body tense. My brother's not who you think he is, Aaron continued. This isn't the first time he's done this. He's got a pattern. Older women, usually married, makes them feel like he's their escape. Then he drains them and vanishes. I said nothing. I could barely breathe. He did it to a woman I used to date, Aaron went on. Told her the same things he probably told your wife. That she was special, different, worth fighting for. That he'd wait for her, take her somewhere new. She left her husband, lost everything, and he disappeared 3 weeks later. You're saying my wife isn't the only one? Aaron let out a bitter laugh. I'm saying Jace doesn't even remember her name after the trip's over. We talked for 20 minutes. He told me things I didn't want to believe, but somehow already knew. How Jace cycled through identities. How he never stayed in one place. How he bragged about women like they were poker chips. And worst of all, how he often didn't act alone. He usually picks women with problems, Aaron said. Women who are already pulling away from their husbands. He doesn't break things. He just steps in after the cracks are already showing. After the call, I sat in silence. The narrative changed. This wasn't just a wife looking for something more. This was a woman who'd been circling escape for so long that the first open door looked like salvation. And she ran for it, never once checking who held it open. But what she didn't realize was that behind that door wasn't a new life. It was a mirror, one that would show her everything she had become. I had the truth now, not just about her, but about what she was about to walk into. And strangely, I wasn't angry anymore. I was waiting, because soon, she'd be the one calling me. It was 2 weeks later when my phone lit up with her name again. I hadn't blocked her, though I thought about it more than once. I don't know why I didn't. Part of me needed to see it when she finally cracked. Needed to witness the moment when the mask she'd worn so confidently began to peel. And that moment came at 9:13 on a Wednesday night. The same time we used to watch that awful crime show together. The one she always pretended to hate but never missed. The first call I let ring out. The second, I watched in silence. By the third, I answered. Her voice came through shaky, like someone trying hard not to let panic show. Curtis, can we talk? I said nothing at first. I let the silence stretch long enough to make her wonder if the line had gone dead. Then, calmly, about the condo or about the man who's probably halfway to Belize by now. Her breath caught. I don't know where he is, she said. He was supposed to meet me in Miami. He never showed up. His number's disconnected. His socials are gone. I don't know what's happening. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But the woman on the other end of the line wasn't my wife anymore. She was someone I didn't recognize. Someone who'd lied so comfortably that even now, when the ground was cracking beneath her, she still expected me to be the one who'd catch her fall. Curtis, I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm not asking to come back. I don't know who I am right now. It was honest. Probably the first honest thing she'd said to me in over a year. But honesty wasn't enough anymore. Did you ever plan to tell me? I asked. Before the flight. Before the bags. Before the lie about your yoga class. Was there ever a version of this where I found out because you had the decency to admit it? There was a pause. Then a soft, broken, no. She started to cry. But not like in the movies. No heaving sobs or shouted apologies. It was quieter than that. More defeated. I imagined her in the dark, makeup smeared, sitting alone in whatever hotel she'd hoped to leave behind the life she had with me. And I realized then, she hadn't just lost Jace. She'd lost the fantasy, the version of herself she was chasing. I thought he was the one, she whispered. I know how that sounds. But he made me feel like I was waking up after a long time being asleep. And now it's like none of it was real. Oh, it was real, I said. Just not the way you wanted it to be. She tried to gather herself. Tried to sound composed again. I'm going to lose my job, she said. If this gets out. If the firm finds out I've been transferring money and planning this whole thing while billing time. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Her voice changed again, softer now, almost childlike. Do you still have the envelope? I looked at it sitting on the desk beside me, sealed in a plastic sleeve, untouched since the day I dropped it off at the lawyer's office. Of course I still had it. And I could still send it to her employer, her parents, her friends, anyone she'd build her image around. Yes, I said. She waited for me to continue. I didn't. Curtis, please, she finally whispered. You have every right to hate me, but I need your help. I don't know how to fix this. And there it was again, that familiar pull. The part of me that always stepped in when she fell apart. The urge to comfort, to carry, to forgive. But something had changed. She didn't just cheat. She didn't just lie. She dismantled the quiet, loyal man who stood by her for nearly a decade and made him out to be a joke, a temporary fixture, disposable, dull. And now that her plan had collapsed, now that her savior vanished into the same thin air she'd hoped to disappear into, now she remembered who I was. "I'll think about it," I said. And I hung up. I stared at the wall for a long time after that. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was numb in a way I couldn't explain. And beneath it all, one simple truth pulsed in the quiet. She didn't miss me. She missed the man who would have cleaned up her mess without asking questions. But that man was gone. And the one left behind? He was just getting started. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, that ship had sailed, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that something still didn't add up. The whole thing felt too rehearsed, too neatly tragic. She'd lost her fantasy man, sure. But her voice on the phone, that edge of panic, didn't sound like heartbreak. It sounded like fear. Around 4 a.m., I sat up and opened my laptop. Not out of curiosity, but out of instinct. I hadn't gone digging since the night I found her hidden files. I told myself I didn't care anymore, that I'd seen enough. But there's something about betrayal that makes you itch for closure, even when you know it's poisonous. So I searched. Not for Jace. I already knew everything I needed to know about that shape-shifting ghost. I searched for her. Not the version I knew, but the one she kept hidden in job records, digital trails, subscriptions, aliases, backups, and forgotten cloud storage. What I found didn't just twist the knife. It dropped the blade. There was another name. A different identity entirely not fake, but former. A name she'd used in her early 20s, before I ever met her, before she legally changed it when she wanted a fresh start. I remembered her telling me once, offhandedly, that she used to hate her last name. Something about how it sounded too sharp, too Eastern European. I never thought much of it at the time. People change their names all the time. But what I didn't realize, what I should have realized, was that she wasn't just escaping a surname. She was escaping a history. That name pulled up a court record. Civil, sealed. But the indexing was still public. The case? Allegations of workplace fraud. A partner in a boutique marketing agency had filed a civil complaint for internal embezzlement. It had been settled quietly. No charges. No jail. Just a payout and a non-disclosure agreement. I stared at the screen for over an hour. My hands were ice. My stomach hollow. I'd spent 9 years with someone I couldn't even Google properly. Because she made sure I never had the right name to begin with. I should have felt stupid. Humiliated. But all I felt was a growing sense of inevitability, like I'd been swimming in a pool she built just deep enough for me never to see the bottom. Later that afternoon, I got another call. Not from her. From a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened back, a man's voice spoke, older, rough, deliberate. "I don't know what business you've got with her, but if you're sitting on anything financial, legal, or otherwise, it's time to back off. Walk away." Click. No name. No number. But I didn't need it. I knew a threat when I heard one. And I knew what it meant. She wasn't just running from me or from us. She was running from people far less patient. People who probably didn't care about what she said over dinner or how she packed her bags. People who didn't ask for folders or signatures. People who didn't hang up when they were done. And she thought I was her safe harbor? I drove across town to my lawyer's office. I updated everything. Moved the documents from passive file to active review. I made my statement, recorded the threats, forwarded the voicemail, and made sure my name wasn't tied to hers in any way. No financial fingerprints, no cross-contamination. I was erasing myself from her world faster than she ever could have imagined. I left the office calm, focused. And then my phone lit up again. This time, it was a video message. From her. I didn't want to open it. I stared at it for what felt like years, thumb hovering, heart pounding. Because if it was what I thought it was, if it was a plea, or a confession, or a goodbye, it would mean the story wasn't done unraveling. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know where it would end. But curiosity is a cruel thing. So I pressed play. The video opened in darkness. No audio at first, just a flicker of movement, the grainy glow of some cheap hotel lamp in the corner. Then her face emerged, pale, hollow, older somehow in just a matter of days. She was sitting on the edge of a bed, knees pulled in, wearing a sweatshirt I hadn't seen since last fall, one of mine, I realized. I used to wear it on rainy Sundays when we'd watch movies with the curtains drawn. "Hey," she said. Her voice was low, barely above a whisper. "If you're watching this, it means I've officially run out of ways to pretend I'm still in control. She took a breath, the kind you take when you've been crying for so long your body forgets how to stop. I messed up, she continued. Not just with Jace. Not just with what I said in front of my family. I messed up years ago, I think. I started building walls even before you noticed. I started telling myself that you weren't enough, not because you weren't, but because I couldn't admit I wasn't. I wanted someone to rescue me from my own boredom, my own failure. And instead of fixing anything, I blew everything up. She paused, wiping her face with her sleeve. I didn't send this to ask for forgiveness. I'm not that selfish anymore. I sent it because you deserve the truth. The full one. I lied about who I was, who I used to be. You probably found it by now. I won't insult you by explaining it away. I've done things I'm not proud of. I just wanted you to know that for once, I see the damage I caused. And I'm sorry. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes wet but steady. You were never the boring one. You were the anchor. And I let go. The screen went black. No dramatic music. No fade out. Just a silent, blunt end, like the woman I thought I knew had finally stopped running long enough to say something true. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. She signed the papers 2 days later. No negotiation, no resistance. My lawyer said it was the fastest uncontested process he'd seen all year. She didn't try to take the house. She didn't fight for the car or the accounts. She walked away with her clothes, her guilt, and the knowledge that there would be no audience applauding the ending she once imagined. And me? I started small. I moved out of the city, not far, just enough to breathe without bumping into places that whispered her name. I took a job at a local IT firm that actually values people over flash. I rented a quiet little cottage with a crooked fence and an honest front porch. I even planted tomatoes, which is something I never thought I'd do. Every now and then, I think about who I used to be. The guy who double-checked locks and memorized coffee orders. The one who thought love meant staying quiet to keep the peace. I don't hate that version of me anymore. I see him as the foundation, the part that didn't break, even when everything else did. And slowly, very slowly, I've started building something new on top of him. It's not flashy. There's no dramatic rebound or whirlwind romance. Just a man who learned, finally, that being steady doesn't mean being small. That kindness isn't weakness. That walking away when someone crosses the line isn't failure, it's self-respect. One Sunday morning, months after everything settled, I sat on that crooked porch with a cup of real coffee, sun on my face, a book in my hand. And for the first time in what felt like years, I smiled without a weight on my chest. That's when I knew. I was no longer surviving her betrayal. I was living my peace.